that note, before we jump in, just a little bit of housekeeping here. Feel free to continue using the chat to share your thoughts or reactions throughout the session. And then if you haven't seen it already, please take a moment to share where you're from, and feel free to share too why you're interested in CLEAR. Also, if you have any questions, if you look up at the top of your screen, feel free to pop your questions into that Q&A box, and we'll save time at the end to get to as many as we can. And on that note too, we'll reserve the Q&A to that Q&A tab. So just refrain from using the raise your hand button. I'm not sure if you guys have that on your end, but yeah. Alrighty, here we go. To start, I'll just go ahead and introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. My name is Grace. I'm your host for today. I'm a business development specialist here at BranchPattern, and I started out working here at the company on green building certifications for portfolios of real estate. And right now I focus on connecting people and partners with our sustainability solutions that we have here at BranchPattern. I'm really passionate about helping teams align their performance with purpose, and yeah, love to do it. And then take a second too for those of you who are not familiar with BranchPattern or who might be new to us here. We're a building consultancy made up of engineers, architects, and sustainability specialists who love working at the intersection of creativity and building science. We team up with design professionals and organizations across North America, South America, and Europe to help make projects healthier for people and for the planet. That might mean jumping in early on in planning and design, or even supporting building operations after the doors open. Wherever really we can help move things forward in a smart and sustainable way, we are there. And now I'm excited to introduce our presenter for today and the creator of the tool, Carlos Kelly, or just Kelly, as he prefers. I'm pretty sure only his mom calls him Carlos, so he gave the okay for everyone to call him Kelly. Kelly is a decarbonization consultant here at BranchPattern and the creator of the tool we're exploring today. He brings a sharp mind for data, energy modeling, and sustainable design strategies, and a lot of creativity and curiosity to solve complex challenges. And I've experienced that firsthand in working with him on green building certifications. And that is exactly what he did here too, in creating this CLEAR tool that we're going to go through today to solve his own personal challenges that he faced as a building performance analyst. So with that, Kelly, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Grace. Let me share my screen here. All right, are we good to go? Do we see this? Awesome. So I just want to recap a bit of the agenda. I just want to put that forward. We're going to cover 4 main topics. The first one is what are we solving with creating this tool and by releasing it. Then we'll transition into what ASHRAE 240P is, which is a proposed standard. We'll take a deep dive into that in just a minute. And then we'll wrap the conversation with what is CLEAR, what is what we're trying to do here, follow up with a live demo. After this live demo, you guys are welcome to ask any potential questions that you may have about any of these topics, and we'll try our best to solve them. Now, what are we solving with CLEAR? I believe the biggest opportunity for CLEAR currently is trying to take a stab at bringing some consistency to inconsistent carbon estimates. For those who are not very familiar with this operational carbon thing, is the industry currently has many sources for something that we call an emission factor. When someone is trying to estimate operational carbon emissions, it's surprisingly easy. What you need is just a unit of energy, and then you multiply this times a carbon factor. A carbon factor is representative of this unit of energy and how much carbon emissions are released to the atmosphere every time you consume one. So different organizations like EPA, NREL, ASHRAE, depending on its many standard, and even LEED has their own emissions factors. The difference between these factors can wildly change depending on the source. And also, if you add that extra layer of what we're trying to do with grid decarbonization, it adds more variability to what that final answer is. So as a result of all of this, it's very difficult for people to compare or rely on these carbon estimates across your full portfolio or projects. To better illustrate this, I want to run a bit of an example here. Imagine that you have an asset X. It's located in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm located, and it has an energy consumption of 100 megawatt hours a year. Someone is commissioned with the task to estimate operational carbon emissions for this given asset. Now, if you run the same consumption through this, let's call 4 different options for carbon factors, if you use CPA, you'll end up with 45.5 metric tons of CO2 emissions. Then if you use NREL, you'll end up with 48.6. If you use ASHRAE, maybe you might end up with something looking more like 61.1. If you use LEED, you end up with something closer to 50.2. And that not even mention like all the answers or all the questions that you may be asking yourself or your team or your client along the way. Things like, what year should I use for this carbon factor? Is my location or my grid correct? If you're using NREL, you might be wondering, what scenario do I need to use? What data set? What metric? It can be very overwhelming. If we add one extra layer of nuance, imagine that you're doing the same task, asset X, location Pittsburgh, consumption 100 megawatt hour, but now you gotta do that times 60 years. You're trying to estimate the whole life cycle of the building. You may end up with bigger answers, right? You're looking at 2,700 metric tons, 2,900, 3,600, and 3,100. Now, if you add these cumulative like differences, you might end up with a difference of -10 to up to +20, depending on the data set or the methodology that you can choose. As you can see, even though the individual year might not be as critical, if you add them up and if you stack them up, then you end up with big difference. This is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a problem, and I want to highlight that none of these estimates are properly wrong. They are ultimately based on a given methodology and is fully registered and is an acceptable number. However, it really complicates the solving for maybe your client is trying to come up with a strategy for electrification. Maybe your client is trying to price for future carbon emissions. Maybe they have internal cost of carbons, or maybe they're trying to narrow it down to or iron out their decarbonization strategy through offsets. Then you might want to give them a better answer. This is when ASHRAE 240P comes into the picture. I want to state that what we're doing with CLEAR is not precisely solving the issue itself. That comes from the standardization of this proposed standard. 240P stands for Quantification of Lifecycle Greenhouse Gas Emissions, and it essentially is a new standard, proposed standard is going to come to finally bring that consistency for the evaluation and documentation of greenhouse gas emissions across a building cycle. I truly believe, as someone has been doing quite a bit, I truly believe like that ASHRAE 240P is going to become as relevant as what 90.1 is in the realm of energy modeling. And it's even more complete. So let's take a look at that and what I mean by more complete. It finally brings that consistent methodology that does not only apply to operational carbon emissions, it also covers embodied carbon emissions. So it's looking at the entire life cycle of the building. And the purpose is if, for example, 90.1 is perceived as being very technical and only like a few handful of people like understand how to apply it, what 240P is trying to do is open up the conversation of carbon emissions to more stakeholders. They want this standard to eventually become what the governments point to, what finance organizations point to, essentially everything or every organization that is in the need for a carbon accounting or a carbon measuring or reporting regarding carbon emissions for assets, they're going to have to at some point point to ASHRAE 240P as the standard. For those who might be a bit unfamiliar with what a life cycle assessment is, a life cycle assessment is divided by many stages. What we're trying to do with these studies is essentially evaluate the environmental impact associated with the building over its entire lifespan, meaning it's separated from extraction and transportation of materials. Then you have what is operational carbon emissions, which relates to operational energy and operational water mainly. And also you have the emissions associated with deconstruction and demolition and disposal with given assets. What we're doing specifically is diving into operational energy. So what is CLEAR? CLEAR stands for Carbon Life Cycle Emissions Analysis Resource. It is the best tool that we put together internally at BranchPattern. It actually came alive as a result of our direct collaboration with clients and trying to get to that final answer or that consistent methodology being applicable across many buildings. So what we're hoping to do by releasing this tool to everyone is to bring developers, organizations, ESG leaders to strengthen their carbon reporting frameworks by including the results of CLEAR and honestly just making the conversation more transparent and consistent. We also want sustainability consultants and building performance practitioners to integrate this into their own life cycle assessments. And we're also hoping that design teams, maybe you're looking at comparing electrification versus traditional systems that might be using natural gas. We want them to easily account for that great decarbonization to get to that final answer. In its current form, the current capabilities of this tool is only running on being able to perform operational carbon emissions. If I want to go back a bit, which is the module B6, right? That is what we have right now set up. However, as we continuously get feedback, and this has been out there for a month already, we continuously try to improve on this tool, and we already have on our target, like include water use emissions and also fugitive emissions. Now I'm going to jump into a live demo on how this works. All right, so the experience is pretty simplified. What we want to do again is to make this easier for everyone. We don't want to overcomplicate things, and we want to take a very straightforward approach on how someone can properly estimate carbon emissions for operational energy. Now, it does give you a very brief example or definition of what we're trying to do. You know, it references the standard, it references what tables we're using, it gives you the methodology right off the bat on the landing page. If you start using this and you start to see that some things might be not as how you expected, you have a give us feedback button there that it will prompt an email and then you can send the feedback to us. If you jump into the B6 module, this is empty for the purpose of the demonstration. We want to create, again, a very easy experience, just 3 steps, and you will get your carbon estimate. The first one is step 1, grid info, step 2, life cycle assessment boundary, and step 3, your energy data. So I like to think about this as a step 1, the where, step 2, the when, and step 3, the what. Coming into step 1, you select your global warming potential basis. Let's say it's 100 years, and then you input your zip code for your asset. In this case, I'm gonna do Pittsburgh just because I know it off the top of my head. The expected completion year for that asset. It might be an existing building, but in case if it is in design, you can estimate. Let's say that you're working on a project currently that is estimated to be done and operating on 2026. You're gonna input your reference start period. Typically, we do 30 years or 60 years. Let's do 60 years. And then you have your electric energy usage. The electric energy usage can be from an existing building or can be from predictive estimated energy modeling. For the purpose of the demonstration, let's just do 100 megawatt hours. And let's say that it's got 25 of that produced by renewables, And then let's say that you have maybe something for natural gas, right? Something that is not more than 10%. Let's do 10 megawatt hours for that. And you can select natural gas, just water, steam, hot water, or other. For this demonstration, let's do natural gas. And it will automatically populate all these graphics. We want to create a very graphic experience and give you the tools to communicate what you want to your stakeholders. It's going to give you the total emissions. Here we can see that we have a bit over 1,000 metric tons for the entire reference study period. The first graphic up to the left that we see here has a lot of value when we're trying to communicate to our stakeholders how the grid decarbonizes over time. It typically ramps up at the beginning upfront, but then this is important to tell to our clients, maybe by 2036, the grid performance for electric will actually be better than natural gas. You can see that natural gas always continues and remains constant. This is very good to communicate to your clients when you can expect the grid to be cleaner than just using a straight natural gas. The second one to the right is just a breakdown, simple and easy. It tells you the total and tells you how much of that is coming from electric emissions and how much of that is coming from natural gas. If you want to look at the percentage, you can just scroll over and it will let you know 87% in this case is coming from emissions. The other two, let's take a look at the top, at the bottom left, sorry. It shows you the cumulative operational carbon emissions. This is great to tell the story and how those carbon emissions stack up over time. You can see that it is pretty aggressive at the beginning, but then it tends to flatten out. If you want to show how the individual year is composed to, you can take a look at the annual operational carbon emissions, where you can actually see here in this example by, if you compare 2026, but let's say 2040, we're looking at a reduction significantly from your base year. Traditionally, this is something that I've seen in the industry that is not necessarily wrong, but it's just the common practice. We take year one and then we multiply that times whatever the reference start period is, right? That's how we think the electrical carbon emissions, and it might not play good if you're trying to look at an electrification system, or it can be a bit confusing to tell a comprehensive story to your clients. We also have a calculations breakdown here, just as a sanity check. You can come here and look at the data. Maybe you're not satisfied with the graphics that you have here. You can copy paste the data that you have here and make your own graphics. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you have this sanity check of like, okay, this is my real estimate. The 1,000 metric tons. What will it be if I weren't using Clear? What will it be if I were just to do what I was explaining? Just take my first year and multiplying that any X given reference period. In this case, you will end up with 2,300. So you can see it's a massive difference. And if you're communicating this to your client, then they can strategize how to use this for their strategy moving forward. The other tab is region summary, very easy. We like to be very clear with what data, pun not intended. We like to be very clear with what data we're using. This is coming directly from the standard. We did not modify this, but we're putting it out there should you not have access to the standard itself. And the extra tab is just release notes, where we keep tabs on what we've been updating. Naturally, as we keep testing this, we somehow pick up a couple edits or a couple errors that we need to do, and we push an update. And with that, that is practically it. I'm gonna stop sharing for a bit.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. We'll just go into the Q&A section now with our last 10 minutes here. I see we have one in the chat at the moment. The first one is, does Clear support modeling future grid decarbonization or regional variations?
Yes, it directly does that let me try to see if I can go back to the tool itself, because I want to show you. So the way we account for that difference is, as I stated, you can just come here to input your zip code. If you don't know it, you can just Google it. And whatever zip code you enter for the US, it will automatically assign you the region that you are at. This will pull all this data. And as you can see, here's how we account for that grid amortization or decarbonization of it. If anyone wants to give me a zip code, I'm happy to try it.
Sure, you can use the Denver one I have, 80203.
So you can see how it automatically assigned you the region RMPA, and here is the prediction, the estimate for how that grid in specific is going to be decarbonized over time.
Cool. That's awesome. We have another question. Is this a global focus, or is this global, or is it a focus just on the North American region?
That is an excellent question. Currently, we're trying to stick to the standard, and the standard is limited to US only. However, as we keep adding functionality for this, I'm very hopeful that we'll add some high level of international grids. The information is somewhat available, and not all countries have this level of estimates or prediction, but as they come up on the industry over the next couple of years, we will be more than happy to include them. As a workaround, what we're actively working on is adding a customizable region for you. So you'll be able to come in and input yourself that prediction, and then you just assign your personalized region.
Cool, I'm excited for that. And then one other one here, what metrics are you calling for that makes clear a more streamlined output versus other carbon emission calculators?
Can you repeat the question? I want to make sure that I'm getting it right.
Yeah, so what metrics make clear a more streamlined output versus other carbon emission calculators?
Yeah. I would say that what we're trying to do here is trying to keep things simple. So for carbon emissions, we only refer to metric tons of CO2. And for energy, we only use megawatt hours. I know that that is a bit unconventional here in the US for most of the time, but I have seen how the industry has moved forward from using other metrics like kBTU for natural gas or even for electric sometimes, and starting to adopt megawatt hours, mainly because of electrification. It's just easier to speak in terms of watts for energy. And regarding carbon emissions, we're personally trying to avoid like adding pounds of CO2 or things that might overcomplicate the narrative, mostly because then it becomes like bigger numbers. And the bigger the number is, then the clunkier your message that you're trying to communicate becomes.
Makes sense. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, but I do have a few. So kind of similar question, but how does the tool compare to other tools that are out there, like one-click LCA, Tally, CBECC?
Excellent question. We had to develop this tool internally out of the need, right? Like we wouldn't be doing this if there were other good options out there in the market that are already doing this. I don't want to call out any specific software because every software out there is great and they serve each specific purposes. But what we're trying to do here internally in BranchPattern is don't like only refer to one software and just take that answer as the go-to. We've spotted that some of them were not doing this, therefore the answer might be just like way higher. So we take what we want from those softwares and then we implement our own things when we see a big value or a benefit on that. I would say the main difference is that not a lot of tools out there in the market account for this level of decarbonization of the grid, and it's not as granular as what this product is. Compared to what's out there. There are a couple ones that I can think of that are trying to do that, but when you try to go into the documentation of that, it's not very clear. It feels like a black box, and that's why here we like to reference to a standard and we like giving you the numbers so you can back calculate everything on your own.
Great. And then another question here, is there a possibility to include more than one, quote, other energy utility, like accounting for hot water and steam?
Great question. We currently support only one entry for electricity, which can be added up, honestly, if you have like different sources, as long as they're electric, you can just add them up. But for other utility, you're kind of restricted to one only. We do support like natural gas, chilled water, steam, and hot water, but that's a good comment. We could add functionality to have more other energy utility. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. And folks, as you're using the tool too, in your own personal practice, like Kelly said before, definitely send those recommendations to the email. That was a great note here. Would love to keep those coming. And then another question, where is your region summary data derived from?
Directly from the standard. If you have access to the standard 240p, you will see the table there where all the carbon factors are listed. I don't remember off the top of my head what version they're using, but what I like about this actually is that it is somewhat archived in a period of time. So the standard itself is not released. First of all, it's a proposed standard, right? Like it's gonna become official at some point and it's gonna be published at some point. For now on, it's still a proposed. Once that is published, it is very, very unlikely that ASHRAE will continuously update that table every year. And some might argue that that might not be as good, but I do see the value of bringing that consistency. Something that happens with other sources like NREL or EPA, they update their data fairly often. So if you perform a calculation, let's say today, and then you try to back check that in 1 year, you'll have a different set available, and you might end up with not a confusing number, but certainly different.
Makes sense. And then I have another question. How does this tool support clear storytelling for owners or other stakeholders on a project?
I believe the power or the value about the story for the, let's call it developers or someone who has a real estate portfolio, is being able to be transparent. And also, if you have, let's say, a group of consultants, you might instruct them to use this standard so everyone is lined up and everyone is giving you this consistency that you want for your reporting. That's what I see as a value. Whereas I think something very common, what happens nowadays is each developer, may have more than one consultant, and currently each consultant kind of gets to decide what methodology they want to use. So the results that they may be getting from their teams may be wildly different. I believe that's the real value behind this, just the consistency.
Yeah, I love that. I know we're 1 minute out from the end here, so I'll just end the Q&A session on that. Any last words, Kelly?
No, I'm just very happy that people are jumping into this. Please do give us your feedback. The more feedback that we can get, the best direction we can have for this tool. As I mentioned, we're actively working on what do we believe is the way forward, but we would love to hear from the industry. We would love to hear from people who are actually using it on their life. Like we use it internally here at BranchPattern, and that can be kind of biased, because we have our own needs, our clients have our own needs, but I will be certainly interested to see what's out there and what people are using it for.
I love it. Yeah, huge thanks again for everyone joining us today. And finally, keep an eye on your inbox too, everyone here. I'll be sending out a recording of this webinar along with a brief survey, as well as my contact info and Kelly's contact info for all of the continued collaboration. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.